is going to be the facilitator for our alumni panel. The question, or the main question for the panel is, what do we do with our ethnic studies degree? Dr. Elizabeth Garcia is a visiting assistant professor in CU Denver's Ethnic Studies Department, and she will be joining us permanently as a CTT associate professor beginning in the fall. And with that, I'm going to hand things over to Dr. Garcia. Thank you.
Thank you, Faye. And welcome everyone to our alumni panel. What I'm going to do is introduce everybody's name and what institution they're an alumni from, and then just allow them to tell us more about themselves through the questions that we have for them to discuss with us today. And please correct me if I mispronounce your name, and I hope everyone is here already. If not, we are about to find out. So we have today William Mundo, CU Denver alum. We have a Whitley Hadley, UCCS alum. Brianna Leyva, also from UCCS. Bestabet Samaripa, did I pronounce that right? From CU Boulder alum. Brianna Hill, CU Boulder alum as well. And we have two Victorias, Victoria Dedet, if that's correct, CU Boulder alum, and Victoria Acuña, who is also a CU Boulder alum, and finally, Tiffany Tasker, CU Denver alum. So welcome all, and thank you so much for being here with us this afternoon and for taking time from your busy schedule to share your experiences as alums and as ethnic studies majors. So the first question is, what is your current position and how did an ethnic studies curriculum prepare you for your career? So William, would you start us off?
Yes, of course. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. Hey, everybody. My name is William. I go by Will. I use he, him pronouns. As Dr. Garcia mentioned, I am an alumni of CU Denver. I graduated with a double major in public health and ethnic studies. I'm currently a fourth year MD student at the University of Colorado School of Medicine, and I actually graduate next month. And so I'll be done with medical school here pretty soon. And in terms of my position that I will be doing is I'm going to be an emergency medicine resident at Denver Health Medical Center, and then also at the university. And so I'll be mostly working in the ER. Other hats that I wear as well, I do have my own consulting company where I work with like local public health agencies, and also do some global and international work with the World Health Organization. And then I'm also an author. I wrote a book as well in the last couple of years. In terms of how my ethnic studies curriculum prepared me for my career, I mean, it's literally the cornerstone of a lot of my successes and a lot of the interactions that I've been able to have with people in the medical exam room or in public health agencies, mainly because it allows me to bring in a different perspective and kind of a counter narrative, really, when we're thinking about a lot of issues that have to do with health inequities. And so part of the reason why I went into medicine was because there are these dramatic health disparities that exist amongst BIPOC communities, and really having an ethnic studies background gave me the foundation to be able to understand, you know, the things that these communities have been through, how to be a better ally, and then also give me the scholarship background to be able to do research to change these health outcomes. And so, for example, I was part of a group a couple of years ago that did some research around chronic kidney disease and dialysis for undocumented immigrants. And as a result of a lot of the research and advocacy that we did, we actually changed Colorado Medicaid law to provide access to these services for undocumented immigrants, saving thousands of lives. And then the other thing too, I'm currently doing related to this, that my ethnic studies degree has helped me, is I've been doing some community outreach and policy advocacy right now in this current legislative session where we're trying to pass a bill to provide health insurance to all undocumented immigrants under 18, and also pregnant undocumented immigrants, so they have access to healthcare. So those are just some of the things that I'm currently doing, and how my ethnic studies degree has really been the foundation to a lot of the work that I have been doing recently. Thank you.
Thank you. We can have Whitley, the same question, and I have put the question in the chat.
Hello, everybody. My name is Whitley Hadley. I use she and they pronouns, and I am back at UCCS. I currently serve as the director of our Mosaic and the LGBTQ+ Resource Center. Mosaic is our multicultural office for student access, inclusiveness, and community, and the LGBTQ+ Resource Center. I am an alum of the class of 2013 from UCCS, and I think it's really, I've been attending more listening throughout the day today, but I think it's been fascinating hearing just the development of ethnic studies across the CU system, because when I graduated, I think West was still relatively new. And so just hearing like Bree, who's on the panel, Irina was just right outside of my office when they were on the call earlier, seeing some of the scholarship they're engaging in and the community that you all have fostered is amazing. It is deeply inspirational. I'm like, wow. That is a very different cohort than I was in. But anyway, how did an ethnic studies curriculum prepare me for my career? I obviously stayed within a similar realm, but focused it more in higher education. So when I took my first Women's and Ethnic Studies course, I think it was Intro to Race and Gender. That was basically the catalyst. That is when my brain basically went on fire because I had never been in a space where we talked about race, we talked about identity, we talked about the layers of like how privilege, power, and oppression all intersect. And we weren't saying even things like anti-Blackness when I was first entering the program. And so it was the catalyst for understanding myself and understanding the communities that I was accessing and being impacted by, but also making an impact. So I always say that with the West program is it served as that catalyst and kind of that like brain on fire of I learned something in class and immediately saw it in action in my life or walking out of the classroom. And so with the ethnic studies curriculum, when I was on campus, I was highly involved in spaces like our student admissions, like recruitment spaces like the one that I'm currently in, focused in on retention and ongoing access advocacy for our historically and currently marginalized populations. And that was where I felt like I was getting the most energy and was feeling the most fulfillment because I could see that impact. And I also was always in a space that focused in on compassion. So seeing someone as a full person and on there are more possibilities. Will, I liked how you already were talking about, and also in your research, your work talking about like the margins and finding power in the margins. And that's what I definitely learned from being in the West program and then have been able to apply through the different places I've been at. It also introduced me to the reality that there are affinity institutions. And so that's something that I have pursued is working in student affairs, specifically at affinity institutions. And that's kind of been my pathway away from UCCS, gaining knowledge, being in communities with others, and then bringing some of that knowledge back to UCCS to impact and create a stronger campus climate. So that's who I am. Whitley, thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Whitley. How about you, Brianna?
Yeah, hi, I'm Brianna Leva. I go by she, they pronouns. I also go by Bree. So my current position, I work for the pre-collegiate program in Summit County. For the CU system people, pre-collegiate is always on each campus. So we mostly work with first generation students who are eager to join academia or trade school or cosmetology, whatever it is in higher education. And I work with our middle school population in rural Summit County. So I mostly work with, 12-year-olds to 13-year-olds. And I also do parent outreach. So that's just something I do in the county. And my ethnic studies curriculum really helped me understand the need for equity in education. Pre-collegiate is a nonprofit within the school district, so we don't exactly work for the school district as teachers or anything. We're our own entity within the district, and our goal is to kind of bridge those gaps that we see for our first generation students within education and accessing academia. Or even accessing mental health as well. First generation students do struggle to find that balance between wanting something for themselves and also gaining access into places and stuff. So my ethnic studies degree definitely set me up to have these conversations with my students on how we can allow ourselves to access space and be powerful in our spaces that aren't always created for ourselves. I think my ethnic studies degree also set me up to have these really difficult conversations with admin, with people in power of how we can better give resources to our first generation students and kind of dismantle this idea that academia is only for one person. So yeah, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you, Brianna. Is Betsabet here? If I'm pronouncing that correctly, Betsabet. If you can go next.
Oh, Betsabet, we can't hear you. I think something's with your mic.
No, still we can't hear you. If it's okay with you, maybe we can move on to someone else and maybe you can try leaving the meeting and coming back, see if that works. Is that okay? So Brianna Hill, if you can answer the same question about your career and its relationship to the ethnic studies curriculum. Brianna? No Brianna Hill? I feel like I'm in my classes. What about Victoria? Victoria Dedet, if I'm pronouncing that correctly?
Hi, yeah, I'm Victoria Dede. And yeah, I can go next. I use she and they pronouns, and I graduated from the CU Boulder Ethnic Studies Department in 2018. And I actually had the pleasure of being the valedictorian for the department that year, which was very exciting. And now I am the Senior Advocacy Manager at New Era, Colorado. And we're a nonprofit that's centered around engaging young people in political processes and community organizing. So that way young people can make an impact on the issues that young people care about. And for me, I feel like this was the perfect place for me to go after finishing my degree. I feel like I'm constantly referencing back to things that I learned in my ethnic studies classes. And I think the biggest thing is that ethnic studies taught me how to identify white supremacy, which I think is really important because a way that white supremacy thrives is by us not being attentive to it, not being able to recognize it. And I feel like I always think about it like The Matrix, even though I've never seen that movie, but like, I know there's a whole thing of like, take the red pill or the blue pill, and like you wake up and like, you can't unsee what you saw, you can't unlearn what you learned. And so I feel like now I'm just like seeing white supremacy everywhere, and I'm able to articulate how exactly these different issues are related to white supremacy. And so like part of my work includes teaching people how to talk to young people about these different issues, teaching young people how to organize other young people on issues like student debt, climate, reproductive health, abortion access, all of these things. And so I always make sure that when I'm training people, I'm making sure that they are able to make these connections for young people, that the issues that we care about, the issues that are disproportionately impacting young people, especially young people of color, young Black folks, young Indigenous people, like those are all products of white supremacy. And, you know, let's have that conversation so that way we can get at the root of the problem instead of trying to come up with a bunch of Band-Aid solutions. So I really appreciate the ethnic studies curriculum for teaching me how to identify white supremacy in pretty much everything.
Thank you. Victoria Cunha?
Hi, I'm Victoria Cunha, she, her pronouns. I graduated from ethnic studies last summer, and I'm also part of the BA/MA program. So in 2 weeks, me and also Betsabet are going to graduate with our master's in education policy. So that's very exciting. But aside from that, I am a youth policy fellow at COLOA, the Colorado Organization for Latina Opportunity and Reproductive Rights. I also just have like a part-time job at this little cafe called Tonatsin, and it's really interesting because ethnic studies is everywhere in my life. Not only do I work with somebody who graduated from ethnic studies in Color, but also my boss and owner of that cafe was in ethnic studies. So it's kind of just everywhere, both in like the professional life and little like part-time job life stuff for me, which is kind of cool. I really enjoy it. But with that being said, I think like ethnic studies has prepared me to approach this work, like in like all of my work in an intersectional framework. It also introduced me to like really amazing people and theory, which I'm a huge fan of. And so now I recently, as part of CLOR, like we passed this Reproductive Health Equity Act bill earlier this month. So it was signed by Polis April 4th. Really exciting thing about ensuring the protection for choice, for contraception, for abortion, for raising your family. There's a lot of stuff that came out of that, you know, people telling us to like go to hell and stuff like that. But I think part of this is that like ethnic studies prepared me to deal with these really in really intense situations because of like all the isms and like systemic forces that affect abortion access. It also has prepared me to handle sort of the like rhetoric that is put against people like me who are fighting for this. It like allows me to sort of fight back in a way, because it's like, you know, that what these people are saying are rooted in a lot of history of like oppression of people and whatnot. Also a lack of like history. People would always be like invoking Margaret Sanger as the sort of founder of abortion, yet like with a background in ethnic studies, you know that, and excuse my dog in the background, but you know that people of color and communities of color, for like Black and Indigenous people of color, have been practicing and managing their own abortions and reproductive health for years. So that sort of stuff from ethnic studies like really prepares me for working in policy, because policy is all about context, all about history, all about like this theory. And so I can apply it in a real way. I'm so sorry she's acting up, so I'm trying not to get distracted from that. But ethnic studies also just prepared me too to be like a really bold person. I think we're like always just talking about like really heavy topics, obviously, but in the way that we do it as such a community that allows us to like read the material and get together and discuss it in a way that allows us to understand it as a community and as individuals has really helped me like hone in what it is that I believe in and also what I know. And so I am just like really thankful for the people who have like encouraged me and my peers to be bold and to like leave the university and leave the university with what we've learned from ethnic studies as like just as confident as possible, is how it's prepared me, because I am, since I'm about to graduate with my master's and fully get into this post-university life, and get into, I don't know where I'm going to go after this, like, but whatever career, I feel just so confident that it's just like, I feel so confident that I am, and I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought with this dog in the background, but overall, I just feel really confident that I can approach my work in a way that is true to who I am, I think, is the way to say that. So ethnic studies, wonderful. I'm really proud to have been a part of it, and also that it's led me into this master's track to even like to take what I've learned even further. So
Thank you. Betsabeth, you want to give it another try?
Yes, can y'all hear me now?
Yay!
Okay, cool. So I'm Betsabeth. My pronouns are they, she, and ella. And right now, so I graduated from ethnic studies last year, last spring. And like Victoria, I'm in the BAMA program in the Education Foundation Policy and Practice, and we'll be graduating this May. Very excited for that. But what has ethnic studies curriculum done for me? It's done a lot. I feel like for me, it's definitely helped me build my consciousness. It's becoming more aware. I feel like I've always been aware, but I never had the language. We never had the language because academia is very inaccessible. And I think, like what everybody said, yeah, it helped me identify white supremacy. It helped me learn how to go about this conversation, how to facilitate a conversation, and how to be strategic about it. Because I'm like, for me, I'm in education. I'm probably gonna stay in education. Because I think educación es liberación. That's what I think. And yeah, I feel like it's just empowering others, and it's that collective effort. Because I feel like I've been very lucky and fortunate to have my community and ethnic studies with the professors, with the students and everybody. But yeah, I guess it's really changed the trajectory of my life, I guess. Because yeah, I feel like I've learned how to become an advocate, and that's really all I could do. And yeah, I don't really have much to say about that, but yeah.
Thank you. And finally, but definitely not least, Tiffany, if you can share with us about your career experience in ethnic studies.
Yes, hi. So I'm Tiffany Tasker. My pronouns are she and her. I got my bachelor's. I was a part of the class of 2018 at in ethnic studies, and then my master's of social science with the track in ethnic studies as well. And currently starting this June, classes start this June, so I'm very excited. I am a doctoral student in educational leadership for educational equity in urban and diverse communities at University of Colorado, Denver. Currently, I am the assistant program director and director of outreach and marketing at the Financial Education and Economic Transformation Center. And we teach financial literacy and provide asset development to marginalized communities. As well as that, I'm the vice president of Friends of Gayoul, and we help young girls in from Gayoul, Senegal, to pursue their primary and secondary education, because oftentimes they have to go into agricultural work even though they want to pursue further education. And ethnic studies has really guided my path because it gave me clarity in what my passion was. It has guided me through my thesis, which will soon guide me through my dissertation. My thesis was Psychopathology of the Insomniac American Nightmare, Whiteness, Gentrification, and the Supposed American Dream in 5 Points, Denver, Colorado. So ethnic studies has really been a prominent part of my life, and it's been prominent since I was at the age of 5, really, because that's when my parents taught me true history. Funny story, going back when I was young, I actually had to write a summary on Thanksgiving. And of course, the Indians and Pilgrims didn't have this nice feast. And this is what kind of sparked my interest, because my dad read it, because I always ask him to read my papers. And he said, this isn't what happened. So at 5 years old, I had to read this book, this thick book. And it was funny because I didn't get in trouble at home, but I got in trouble at school for telling the students what really happened. And I wrote it in my report. So yeah, ethnic studies has always been a part of my life.
Thank you. So we clearly can already see that with ethnic studies, there's so many different fields, so many different careers, graduate programs, medical school, all kinds of different areas that you can take ethnic studies with you and continue to be successful. So, however, as we know, especially when you're first gen college student, ethnic studies isn't necessarily a major that is on your radar or that you even know about. So if you can all share with us, how did you come to decide to major in ethnic studies? And anyone that wants to start us off can jump right in. Go ahead, Whitley.
Yeah, I decided to major in similar what you just started off with. I'm a first generation graduate and a Black woman, and that's on a predominantly white campus, like across the CU system. And so definitely had no idea about colleges and had the mindset of I'm going to college because my family said I'm going. And I would get a degree and then I would get a job. And that's what I knew. And I landed on campus, had no idea what I was doing. Thankfully, in my second semester, that's when I took Intro to Race and Gender with Kimberly Holcomb. And at the same time, I had just gotten involved with the Black Student Union, and Dr. Stephanie Spalding had just joined the West faculty that year and was the advisor to the BSU. And so both a mix of, again, like this ethics of care that came from Kimberly Holcomb in teaching that course, and having so much patience with someone that has that group in a community that is so committed to like color evasiveness and like rerouting all these different systems to make it seem like you are the one that is doing things wrong. She had so much compassion in that unlearning that happened in that first semester. And then Dr. Spalding was very, I would say just very like strong and such the strongest advocate I'd ever seen in as a Black woman in a position of authority of like a faculty member. And I said, I want to be closer to someone like that. Someone who I think, who was it that said, I think Victoria, you may have mentioned this, both Victorias mentioned this piece around just the critical thinking skills and kind of like, quote unquote, like talk your shit. Like Dr. Spalding knew how to do that, knows how to do that. And I said, I want to be like that. I want to feel confident in what I'm saying. And I want to know what is backed up. And I want to know the history of how we even got to this place to be able to do better. So both of those faculty members at the time were the ones that influenced me to stick with West. And then by the time I was in junior year, I just continued taking West courses. And my advisor said, why don't you just declare it as your second major? And I said, well, all right, sounds great.
Victoria Cunha?
Yeah, so my story is very interesting. I'm an out-of-state student, so I'm originally from Texas. I am from San Antonio, which is a like, whatever the heck this means, minority majority city. So I just grew up around a bunch of other Latins and whatnot. So never really thought a lot about like ethnic studies in that sort of sense. I was just like, my culture sort of was like everywhere for me in that sense. Although the high school I did go to was named after Robert E. Lee, so maybe that was something to start getting me thinking about this stuff. But I originally like had always been like very passionate about social justice issues and whatnot, but never thought about it as like like something I could major in or have like a career in. My family definitely was like, go to college, you're going to do that. I wanted to go to college, definitely. But I originally was interested in STEM, which clearly did not turn out that way, thank God. But it was just like my grandpa did, he's Chilean. So there's like lots of mining background and engineering and stuff in that way. So STEM and just in general too was like really pushed when I was growing up. So I had wanted to be an astronaut ever since I was a kid. still would love to if the opportunity ever came. I'd take it up, but got to college and in astrophysics realized that like in astronomy that it was not for me. I think like I am someone who I'm not necessarily first generation. Like my dad's side of the family does have a college education, but my mom's side of the family doesn't. And throughout the whole like college process and like getting into college, I didn't really have help in like what to expect and like what to look into. And I never really took advantage of advisors or anything like that either. I was kind of like, I'm just gonna try and do all this stuff for myself. Astronomy ended up not really working out, mostly because I was just going through a lot in my life, but also really was struggling with physics and like the really hard science stuff of it. And then also just being around like at CU at a very heavy research and heavy research university where there's just like a bunch of like white men around you and your science classes. I was like, I don't know about this. So like the reality hit me sort of that this is something that I need to switch. And so I just spent like a lot of late nights that very first semester of college going through all these different like majors that CU had offered with the hopes that I wouldn't have to like transfer back. So I eventually came up on ethnic studies. I was like, I had heard of it and sort of stuff like that, and decided, okay, like, yeah, fuck it. This is what we're gonna do. And so I didn't take my first ethnic studies class until my sophomore year. I took the foundations with Dr. Sepulveda. That was great, like intro, everything. And then the second semester second semester of the spring, I went straight into theory, which was kind of intense, but it was with Dr. Seema Sohi. It was a great experience. Like as I mentioned earlier, like with Color, like the whole thing is I love being bold and I love just like going straight for like the hard stuff, the intense stuff. And so theory was a way to really get me into that. So with that being said, then I found the BAMA track as I had started my sophomore year, had looked around all that sort of stuff, and was also just really interested in education too throughout my life. And so to come to CU for something completely different and then find the perfect track from just like snooping around on all these like CU Boulder pages, crazy. So I don't have this sort of typical experience knowing exactly what I wanted, which not right. That's not the same for a lot of people too. Like we just really kind of went in and like winged it. So I'm glad that it turned out the way that it did, because getting the ethnic studies bachelor's degree is amazing. And then to have the opportunity to connect that with an education policy master's is perfect for me. Like I'm always like, I came from something completely different, ended up with the most perfect track. So just to goes to show how silly life goes.
Tiffany, I'm curious, since you mentioned that you've been doing ethnic studies since you were very young, did you think about ethnic studies as a major coming into college, or did you also have to kind of find your way to it?
I found my way to it, and I was actually in, just like Victoria, I had a big interest in engineering. So I was started in engineering. And then I believe it was my second semester, I was interested in taking one of Professor Green's courses in African-American history. And I've always been interested to take his course. And that is because my dad and him used to go to college together. So when he was working on his master's, my dad was around my age working on his undergrad. So I was interested, and they would joke around about like how his class is tough. So I wanted to take it, I love challenges. So I wanted to take his course, but I was terrified. And then I took his course, passed, did very well. And I took another course with him and another course, and then with a few other professors. And I eventually dropped my engineering major. And there was like a few things that I have learned in ethnic studies, and it was specifically in his course. I learned about Sankofa, which means reach back and get it, in the Twi language in Ghana. And really that means to like, you have to ground your roots and understand your roots in order to move forward. So I carry that saying with me throughout college. And that's what really kind of helped guide my path too. Along with that, ethnic studies really gave me an understanding, like a few mentioned it before, how it allowed them to properly articulate what's going on in society, what's racist. So I loved and I enjoyed being a part of the ethnic studies department because I learned about whiteness. I learned about critical whiteness studies, and I was able to express what was happening, what was wrong, what white people were doing that is wrong without simply saying that's racist. So, yeah.
Anyone wants to go next?
I can share really quick, just because I feel like medicine is kind of a unique branch off of ethnic studies. And so for me, I'm also a first-gen student. And when I started college, I majored in biology, like every other pre-medical student, right? Like, oh, you want to go to medical school, you have to be a biology major. And so that's kind of where I started. And then early on, I unfortunately had some, very horrible things happen. Like my father passed away early on when I started college, and I was kind of like really lost. And I got plugged in with the Latino Student Services office in the Office of Identity and Inclusion. And before it was the Office of Education and Opportunity, I think it was. And so I got plugged into there, and then they ended up going to a critical race theory conference, and I got kind of tagged along just to kind of go check it out. I really had no idea what I was to expect. And that's kind of where I first started to hear about ethnic studies, and it really like caught my attention. And so when I ended up coming back to campus after that conference, I was like, hey, like, do we have ethnic studies here in our school? And then it turned out that we did. And I ended up taking this class called Race, Ethnicity, Health, Race, Ethnicity, and Social Justice with Dr. Espinosa. And that's where it kind of came together, where I was like, oh, like I can, think about health in the context of ethnic studies. And so I was like, you know what, like I want to be an ethnic studies major. And then some of my advisors were like, well, you want to go to medical school, is that you have to be a science major, so you can't do ethnic studies. And so I was like, well, that's kind of what I love. Like I love science too, don't get me wrong. But my passion really lied in ethnic studies. And so I ended up not listening to my advisor. I still switched over to ethnic studies, and I still was able to get into medical school. And I think if anything, it really made me stand out when I was, going through the medical school application process, and even throughout the medical education curriculum. I've been able to serve as a resource for a lot of my colleagues and peers who are interested in this type of work. And so for me, I kind of went to that conference, and it definitely changed my life forever. And just kind of proves the point that you can do anything with ethnic studies. That's what I love about the degrees, that there's no limitations to it. You can take it wherever you want. And so for me, it really, guided me to pursue this career in medicine. And now, every time I'm working with my patients, I feel like I'm able to connect with them at a different level, where I'm able to build that trust that's oftentimes missing because of a lot of the, horrible things that the medical community has done to people of color. And so for me, it's kind of helped be that bridge where understanding those traumas that exist, and really, helping patients heal from that, at the same time helping them like heal from the illness. So it was pretty awesome how I got introduced to it. And never take no for an answer. You can do whatever you want.
And I want to reiterate that your point that to go to any professional school or graduate school, you do not have to major in a science to go to medical school, or in poli-sci to go to law school, or what have you. I've worked with tons of students in my career, undergraduate students who have majored in English, and they want to go to medical school. They just make sure they take all the pre-med courses, right, that schools require you to take, but you don't have to necessarily major in a science. So another plus for ethnic studies, it can get you into medical school and law school because you will stand out, right? While every other application is someone who's majored in the science, right? They'll look at your application, twice, because it'll be like, this one isn't a science major, but they want to be in medical school. Why? So even if for that extra look, it's worth it. So I'm keeping track on time here. Anyone else wants to share their story of how you came to decide on your ethnic studies major?
I'll go ahead. My high school English teacher actually pushed me into ethnic studies. She is now like my best friend, but she minored in ethnic studies at the Colorado State University. So she like became like my guru while I was in high school, and very much nurtured this idea of me wanting to go into ethnic studies. And then I got to college and I was like miserable. I was the struggling first gen student, and I got to a point where I was like, college is such a joke. Everyone set me up. Like, of course they set up the brown girl to come here and fail. Like, I was so bitter. And I went home after my first semester of college really angry and really upset with the system. And my English teacher like brought me to her house, and I was like just crying, just sobbing. And she's just like, where are the ethnic study classes? Like, give me your catalog, like let's look for this. And then she's like, West, what's West? And then she was looking at the curriculum and looking at what classes they had to offer. And she's like, all right, we're putting you in the intro class, because I was also signing up for classes for the spring. So she very much was like taking control. And I was just like sitting passenger seat, like crying, sobbing, throwing up about college. And then I took my first course with Dr. Trey Whitley. And I always feel like ethnic studies saved me, because I felt so lost and so misunderstood. And when I stepped into his class, I was just like, yep, this is it. Like, I found my calling. And I very much continue to tell my students, like, even if you're like not going into ethnic studies, taking an ethnic studies class will like just make you feel at home and make you learn about yourself and identities you didn't always have access to. A lot of my students are always joking. They're like, Miss Bree, you like to queer up spaces. And I'm like, that's thanks to ethnic studies and the women's studies department in my university. So I very much carry the love for ethnic studies that my English teacher had for all my students. So I definitely thank the ethnic studies department for like being the saving grace that I needed when college felt very lonely.
Yes, I'm seeing agreements in the chat of I'm assuming similar experience of ethnic studies becoming a haven, particularly in certain types of campuses where it might be a little challenging to create a sense of community for ourselves. So I want to move to the next question, which is, what advice do you have for current ethnic studies students as they look for future careers or future programs to apply to? What would be your advice now that you're kind of on the other side?
I would say do your research on the program or career or whatever it is you want to do. So for instance, if you're going towards going to apply at a master's or doctorate program, do your research on the school, on the program, see if are you passionate to go through with this? Is this what you want to do? When you do your research, look at the professors, look at their descriptions, look at their research. Is it someone that you can potentially work with or you're interested to have on your committee? Definitely just overall, just do your research. We should be used to doing research because we're college students. So you just got to do it for where you want to go to.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic advice. I'd certainly say that to all of my undergraduates when they're thinking about graduate school is do your research. Don't be afraid to reach out to current graduate students in the program and ask them questions of what the experience is really like, what's not in the brochure, whether the faculty there are good mentors or not. All of that is really important in what kind of experience you have. in graduate or professional school.
Yep,
What else? Other advice?
I just agree with what you both said, but Elizabeth, what you were just saying about the advice I continue to give students is if you have the opportunity, especially going into a graduate program, to meet the other students that will be in that program, I would take that opportunity because that is your community. And especially being here at a restorative justice themed symposium, excuse me, that's really important thing to consider is when things get tough, when things get hard, like what Bree was just mentioning, when it feels like the rest of the community, the rest of the institution, organization doesn't understand you or see you, those are going to be the people that you rely on and that are going to bring you back in and do that form of care. And so that's what I talk about with many students now is think about who are the people that you will be with, working with, and are they actually going to be able to be your community, and not only solely in like a care format, that's a significant component of it, but also the folks that are claiming that they are allies are also advocates or are invested in the work that you are doing. Ask them what are they doing to actually get that information, because that will also inform you of who are the people that are going to speak on the same things that you are advocating for, that you are working towards when you're not in the space. When it's not like Bree was just saying this, and this happened to me as when I was a student here of, oh, Whitley's an ethnic studies major, so we know we need to talk about this thing. When the ethnic studies major is not in the room, who is talking about things? So that's something I like to advise folks on is think about who is going to be your community. Your community will carry you into anything that you want to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I just want to add, and I think I kind of already mentioned this, that I feel like the ethnic studies degree and program is just such a versatile degree in the sense that you can really take it wherever you want. And I think the advice that I would give to students right now is really think about like your niche, you know what I mean? Like the area that you really want to like learn more about and be an expert in, because I feel like the field of ethnic studies itself is so broad that sometimes it can get a little overwhelming. And if you're more like me, you just kind of get lost with all the awesome things that there is. But I just advise you to really kind of think about, you know, a specific interest within ethnic studies that you want to do and really pursue that. And then the other thing too is you're an expert in this. Once you get your degree, you're an expert in ethnic studies. And so like if there's any diversity related work that needs to be done, you know what I mean? I feel like oftentimes that is put on BIPOC students just because, you know, we're, you know, diverse individuals. And so it kind of makes sense, but like you need to be compensated for that work. And so like, I think, you know, leveraging your degree to do that work and be compensated for the work that we're already doing is something that you can definitely focus on, especially as you progress throughout your career.
I really like what Will said about finding your niche. Because for me, I thought that I was going to go apply for master's programs like straight out of undergrad, but then I realized that I actually didn't feel like I had found my niche. And so I didn't feel confident that I could actually do that. So then I started working with New Era, Colorado in advocacy. And through working here for 4 years, I have now found my niche. And now I am actually planning to go get my master's in American Studies this fall, which I'm very excited about. And so I would also, some advice I would give is like, if you don't feel ready for grad school after undergrad, like that's totally okay. And you can still be prepared for grad school by like going out into the field, like doing work with organizations that you really support. And I also think that organizations can provide a lot of support for you in like your growth and your development, in finding your niche. I've been able to go to different conferences and learn about different issues, different work that's going on. For a really long time, I didn't realize that there was like a difference between like advocacy, direct service work, policy. Like there's just so many different spheres of work that you can be involved in, and it can definitely feel overwhelming. And so I think something that's really helpful is to just kind of just go for it, like just get in and then like see what feels good, see what opportunities you can use to help yourself grow, and then you'll know when you feel ready to pursue your education.
Yeah, I would add to just a small thing because I agree with what everyone is saying. Also that like with your positionality, like you are going through college and like coming to learn what it is you believe in. And so same thing like that kind of like what Tiffany was saying is like do the research for the organizations or the things that you want to do. It's so in like my case, especially like I am an abolitionist, like all around. And that what guides me. And it's I like have been throughout college, ethnic studies has allowed me to like build up that belief and that position. And so when coming into the career search, I have had to think a lot about will I be in a space that is open to those views? Will I be in a space that is that has other radical people around me? Because ethnic studies is all about being radical, like that you got to put stuff into action. So that's an important thing because still you're in a world where people hear of ethnic studies and they're like, oh, like what, like some social justice warrior, like snowflake type of stuff. Like there's perceptions about it for sure. And so it's again just like owning your shit and choosing a place that like also allows you to own your shit and support you doing that. And especially like being aware too with who we're working with. Like a lot of us will end up in some nonprofits. And so it's important to think about the nonprofit industrial complex too, because that is, sorry, my voice keeps getting dry. That is also part of a systemic force that we talk about. Like it is absolutely something that can reflect and exacerbate white supremacy, especially since we're working with the state and whatnot, and there's like money involved, and we've all heard stories of like really controversial things with nonprofits. So my advice is just like carry everything with you from that ethnic studies degree to all facets of your life for what it is you believe in, for where you go, that you know that what you believe in is going to be supported and even uplifted. And also that you're like aware for when you're in organizations that do have a certain level of complicity with the system is how you practice sort of what you learned and going against those forces. So it's being aware of how once you get into the, not the real world, but once you get into the outside of university, into your career, how you leave this sort of community of ethnic studies and are now faced with a lot of other systemic forces that are outside of the university. So it's being really aware of that and being true to yourself and continuing to practice what you've learned even outside of your classes.
Well, to add on to that, I think that y'all need to trust yourself that you know what's best for you and don't rush it. Take the time, because I feel like, yeah, so I guess my message to take care of yourself, that simply because I don't think it's draining. This work is draining, and make sure that your accesses are being met wherever you go. Make sure that the spaces that you go to, that you feel good, that you feel, that you feel like you're contributing, and that it's not silent space, because, there's a lot of people that know what to say, but their actions say different. So I would just say, trust yourself, take care of yourself, and there's no need to rush. So yeah.
I would say have fun, like just have so much fun. I had the best time of my life in my West program. Like I can't, like, we talked about a lot of heavy stuff, and like a lot of times I would leave my class being like, oh God, like now I gotta think about these things at night. But like I can't mention like how many times I was just laughing in class or dancing in class or just like creating like lifelong relationships with my peers. I think bringing your passions into your study is so important. One of my seniors always laughs at me because I did my capstone on Bad Bunny. Like that's my research. And he just like, Miss Fangirl over here, like made her research Bad Bunny. And I'm like, yeah, and what about it? Like, so like bring those passions in. And my work is in decoloniality for Puerto Rico specifically. And I always use the practice of decoloniality in education and pushing my students into thinking of a post-colonial future for themselves, which they have never heard of. They're always like, what? Like, and it's always so much fun to open their eyes and minds to this work. And I always tell my students, I was like, I had the time of my life being an ethnic studies major. Like, don't get me wrong, like there was days where I'm like crying in class being like, oh my God, we're never free. But there was also days where like Dr. Rose would be like making me belly laugh because she'd like crack a joke during like a serious moment. I'd be like, oh God. Like I had a lot of fun, and it's so important in these heavy moments to just like be in a community where like you can all like look at one another and be like, let's just laugh, let's just like enjoy life, like let's celebrate our resiliency in this work of liberation and stuff like that.
Yes, thank you. So we have about 4 minutes. So I wanted to check in and see if anyone had any questions. You can put it in the chat or just jump right in. No questions?
I'll just say it's not a question, but thank you all for sharing. And it's really inspirational and kind of amazing to see where you all have gone. And I hope that students who are in this space are taking, note of all this beautiful and wonderful work that you're doing now and what an ethnic studies degree can accomplish. And really it's anything, right? Seems like the message today. So thank you all for being here. It's been really a privilege to hear your stories.
Thank you. We do have a question on the chat. Did anyone do research in undergrad for ethnic studies? You can talk a little bit about that for those of you who might have done research.
Yes, I did do research. So I majored again in ethnic studies for my bachelor's, and the research I did, I've been working with the FEET Center, which I was telling you that I'm the director and assistant program director now. I've been working with them. Actually, I originally was their student, and then I became an intern after I graduated from their program. And I did research on providing financial literacy, again, in marginalized communities and bringing it to the middle school level and possibly even bringing it to a lower level and making it more easier so that they can comprehend, so we can build a curriculum that kind of goes through and follows them up through high school.
Anyone else?
I did some research during undergrad, specifically looking at the traditional healing practices of the people of the highlands in Guatemala. So I spent some time with the community there, kind of learning about their practices, their perceptions of kind of Western the medical system, and really just kind of, it was pretty much like a qualitative research project where I pretty much interviewed them, trying to figure out exactly what it is that they do for healing in order to be able to incorporate that into like a Western like medical model, to essentially to kind of like bridge that gap, right? And so that's what I did for my undergrad research. I wrote a paper on it, happy to share it.
Awesome, thank you. And then we also did have a research panel earlier today, and I think there's a recording of it. So if you're interested in that, let us know and we can get the recording to you so you can see what some of undergraduate students across the different institutions that are represented today are doing in terms of undergraduate research right now. So with that, I want to thank our panelists for your time, for being here with us today, and for so honestly and openly sharing all of your experiences with ethnic studies. I think our takeaways are that ethnic studies can pretty much take you anywhere, and that it isn't unlike any other field in the sense that it provides you a sense of community, a place where you can laugh and cry together, but also where you can generate a vast amount of skills that are clearly transferable to all sorts of different career fields and graduate and professional schools. So thank you all so much for being with us here today. And I'll pass it on to Faye. I think we have a break, right, Faye?
Yes, and I also wanted to thank again Dr. Elizabeth Garcia for facilitating the panel. Thank you so much for panelists and to Dr. Garcia. We will have our keynote with Dr. Clint Carroll at 3:45. So we do have a 15-minute break. So get away from your screens, enjoy the sunshine, and I will see you in 15 minutes.
Thank you, everyone.